morning and welcome to Love Every Moment, coming to you today from Juneau, Alaska. Today's verse is 1 Peter 3:9. Not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but giving a blessing instead. For you were called for the very purpose that you might inherit a blessing. Well, this, of course, comes after last week's verse. I had the link up here, which talked about we should be harmonious, sympathetic, brotherly, kind-hearted, and humble in spirit. And you know what? When we surrender everything to Him in love, we become submissive. And submissive Christians end up being these things, harmonious and humble in spirit and so forth. And this is what leads to unity in the church. And now this week's verse says, not returning evil for evil or insult for insult, but rather turning the other cheek. You might say, well, if they're of the wrong political party, I've got to give them an insult back if they insult my party. I don't see that here. This is blessing them instead. That's what the Bible's talking about. And you know what? Here's probably the biggest point, and it's coming early in today's video, and that is the submissive Christian is actually in the leadership position. He's in charge. And why? Because he's leading the way to unity. Someone has to lead the way. Someone has to give so that there will be harmony and unity in the church. And it's the submissive Christian who does that. Think of Jesus. He washed his disciples' feet. That was being submissive. Was he not in charge when he did that? Of course he was in charge. All right? So, it says, not returning evil for evil or insult for insult. Let's look at, I already mentioned, turn the other cheek. Let's look at another one from the Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 5:11 and 12. Blessed are you when people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad. For your reward in heaven is great. And we'll talk about the reward in heaven in a minute. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Now back to the main verse there. It says also we're supposed to be giving a blessing. And then it says that we might inherit a blessing. And this is what we were called for. It says you were called for the very purpose that you might inherit a blessing. Well, what blessing? Well, there's a lot of blessings actually. Most of us think of the blessing of salvation, but let's look at an interesting cross-reference. 1 Corinthians 15:50. It says, now I say this, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. So if we are living in the flesh, we simply can't inherit the kingdom of God, period. We're out of luck, okay? So what we have to do is love Him more than anyone else or anything else, that He could have anything in our lives. That puts us to full surrender. And then with that, He could come into our lives, lead our lives, take over the driver's wheel, as I often say, and then we're in the right place. We may not be perfect yet, but we're right where He wants us to be. And then we start thinking the same way He thinks, and speaking the way He thinks, and acting the way He acts, and most importantly, loving the way He loves. So that's the ideal of it. Now, I attended this one church for one day that was a prosperity church, and they talked about, well, when we inherit heaven, it's all about us and what our wants are. He said if we like skiing, there's going to be skiing in heaven, or if we like surfing, there's going to be surfing in heaven. Ridiculous, okay? The whole inheritance that's really going to be touching us where we want to be. It's going to be being in His presence. Right now, we have this muddy filter of the flesh. And even though I'm a Christian, I'm following Him, there still is that. But in heaven, not only do we get to be in His presence, but without that awful filter. And that's the best thing about it. And you know what? We should hope that others get there. So let's lead the way through submission to harmony. Because if we love every moment, we're going to love every moment. I'm your average Rudge, and I hope you have a great week.